Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I want to thank you all for coming to our hearing this afternoon. And please know that the testimony that will be given is going to be recorded. So we really appreciate the fact that you're here this afternoon. The first bill that we're going to be hearing will be Senate Bill 194, and we're very delighted and excited to have with us the Secretary, Secretary Chaudhry. We can have you to come up. If you could bring your witnesses, everyone who's going to participate in the testimony, that would be wonderful. We're very glad to see you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the subcommittee. Appreciate being here. For the record, I'm Atif Chaudhry, Secretary of the Maryland Department of General Services. I have with me here today Wendy Scott Napier, Assistant Secretary for the Office of Real Estate within the Department of General Services. I wanted to talk briefly about Senate Bill 194. The purpose is to modernize the lease procurement process administered by DGS. There's three key areas where we are making modifications to in the bill here in current legislation. The first request that the non-competitive procurement threshold be increased from 2,500 square feet to 5,000, up to 5,000 square feet, which permits the department to meet new space needs expeditiously. There are numerous small agencies, boards, units that require either new office space or experiencing program growth that require additional small amounts of space to be leased. More recently, DGS is taking a holistic approach to reviewing space needs across the state in order to right-size the state's both owned as well as the leased portfolio. This may involve modifying larger, inefficient leases to procure smaller leases where appropriate. As a result of these initiatives, there has been an increased volume of new lease procurements, and we anticipate this volume to continue to increase over time as we continue to right-size our portfolio. The second issue addressed by the bill seeks to reduce the advertisement timeline period from 30 to 20 days for competitive lease procurements. This will create consistency with advertising requirements with other competitive procurements, permit DGS to use shorter advertising timelines for small and mid-sized office requirements, and assist with expedited lease procurements as necessary. It's critically important to note that this 20-day minimum will not be used by the department for large projects, meaning large square footage leases, or those where DGS determines that a longer advertisement period is in the best interest of the state and is needed for landlords and other proposers to prepare adequate responses to more complex or large-scale leases that will be issued by the department. The third thing the bill addresses is to move the outdated requirement to advertise in newspapers to instead post lease procurement notices electronically on the DGS website, as well as the e-procurement platform used by the state. Commercial landlords and brokers regularly use the e-procurement platform online and the DGS website to seek out real estate procurement opportunities. And this change also provides cost savings by eliminating the need and requirement to post in newspaper ads. Overall, the proposed legislation will create efficient time efficiencies by reducing the advertisement period, facilitate reaching a larger audience through electronic advertising options while reducing advertising costs, and enable DGS to expeditiously procure new smaller space requirements on an as-needed basis and be more flexible when it comes to these small lease procurements. Legislation will prove beneficial as Maryland State Government continues to refine and balance its approach to hybrid work, seeks cost savings through reductions in the lease portfolio, and streamline operations across the state portfolio across the state. Thank you for the opportunity to provide this testimony. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. I think we want to wait until after we hear the testimony from the witness, and then we will open the floor for any questions from the committee.
Sure. And Madam Chair, I think my Assistant Secretary is here just to answer any technical questions.
Assistant, I'm sorry.
Assistant Secretary of Real Estate, just for any technical questions that concludes our testimony here.
Okay, we will now entertain questions from members of the committee. Are there any questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you,
Enjoy
Madam
your
Chair.
day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now hear Senate Bill 127, state government grants and contracts, reimbursement, or direct cost. Would ask that Senator Kagan please come forward. Glad to see you as always.
Hello, Madam Chair. How exciting it is to call you that.
Well,
I was hoping to be
much.
the first bill of your first day and all that. But I'm good with deferring to Secretary Chowdhury. He does a great job. For the record, I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville, and often described as the senator for the nonprofit sector. This bill should be obvious and common sense. And it's really important. It's a priority for Maryland nonprofits, and I'm delighted that Henry Bogdan is here with me from Maryland Nonprofits. A number of nonprofit organizations have submitted testimony, and there is no opposition. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about this really important bill. In 2018, the Maryland General Assembly unanimously, the Senate unanimously, the House unanimously, passed a bill creating a 10% floor for indirect costs. So what's indirect cost? That's basically overhead. So if there's a nonprofit organization that wants to do business with government, and let's say that's a $100,000 contract, $10,000 of that could be spent on rent, on hiring staff, on paying the phone bill, just making sure that they provide the services while also making sure that they can stay in business and not have to raise money for overhead, which is hard to do. Philanthropists want to give money for programs and not for rent or computers. So this bill proposes to do a permanent fix. The federal level for 10 years had a 10% overhead or indirect allowance at minimum, and many grants or contracts provide for more than that. So last April, the Federal Office of Management and Budget just moved it up 5%. So it's now 15%. Rather than the state continuing to play catch up and going from 10 to 15 to whatever in the future the federal government does, we just say whatever level the federal government has, that's what Maryland should have, so that we can take federal funds and use them appropriately. Now, just a reminder, nonprofit organizations are nonpartisan, and they are in every nook and cranny of our state. They provide social service care, arts, and quality of life that makes our communities work so much better. So if all of the food pantries, battered women's shelters, literacy council, children's arts organizations went out of business, we would have two options. One is that our communities would be worse off, or two, state government would have to pick up the slack, which would be expensive and would mean higher taxes. So these nonprofit organizations work every day in every corner of our state to make a difference. But too often, they choose not to apply for a grant or contract because it would be a money-losing proposition. So we need to make sure that they are applying, because the for-profit companies that might apply for the same grants or contracts, their overhead that they take, the overhead that they put aside, can be a minimum of 25%. And we've heard really commonly 35, 40, 45%. So our nonprofit organizations are kind of bargain basement. They're doing great work, but we don't want them to go out of business. We don't want them to have to struggle to provide the services that make such a difference in our communities. Just want to do just a few things. Yeah, I think I've mostly, hold on. One of the things that I want to suggest for your consideration, this new administration is making a lot of changes, and we don't know what they're going to do. It is hypothetically possible that the Trump, I call it the Trump-Musk administration, but I will say the Trump-Vance administration, it's possible that their Office of Management and Budget could decide to change the overhead costs, this de minimis cost. What if they were to cut it out totally? We want to protect Maryland's nonprofits. So I am going to suggest an amendment that would have 15% as the floor and then also defer to whatever, a minimum of 15% or higher, whatever, follows the federal government's rate. I will reference, and then I'm going to toss it over to Henry, Madam Chair, if that's okay. I will reference the fiscal note, which we found a little bit surprising and a little bit confusing. We didn't know why they didn't go to Maryland nonprofits or to any nonprofit organization in the state to understand how indirect costs work. You'll see that Maryland Municipal League talks about this as being important for them, and so many nonprofits dealing with domestic violence and others, so they're all accessible to you, and I just want to mention that we found some of their reasoning to be unexpected and perplexing. So, so with that, if it's okay with you, Madam Chair, Henry Bogdan has been working on this for eons, and he's the smartest guy in the room on indirect costs, probably. So, so if it's okay, I will defer to him.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you, Madam
Are there
Chair.
any questions of the Senator? Okay, we'd like to have the following people to come up. Okay. Yes, Senator.
Thank you. And thank you, Senator, for the bill presentation.
Yeah.
The last part that you touched on with the fiscal note, I just wanted to allow you the opportunity to elaborate maybe a little more on there, because I too found it a little perplexing based on the testimony you gave versus what they have written here, how they're talking about the local effect. Can you elaborate on that maybe just a little bit as far as what your concern is with the fiscal note, or the differences that you think may be inaccurate, for lack of a better description, from their end?
Thank you, Senator Quarterman. And again, Henry can do this more technically. I speak in plain language that I can try to see if I can do that. So first off, I found a gap in their research. If you see who they consulted with, it was departments and not any actual practitioners of those that receive grants or contracts. Without passing this bill, we are putting our nonprofits under extreme strain, and the possibility that one of two things, that they either won't apply for grants and contracts, and so we'll be spending more taxpayer money at a higher level with for-profit businesses putting aside more money for their overhead costs, or the nonprofits just won't even apply because they know it's a money-losing proposition. And so, so again, this bill, identical, just a different number to match the federal level, because the federal level was 10% for 10 years. So this passed the Senate and the House unanimously, and we just think it's time to catch up to the federal level and follow them, so we don't have to come back every several years to catch up to what the federal government is doing. And a lot of times, Senator, this is with federal funding, so it's not even state taxpayer money. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's pieces of both. But when federal funds are coming through, we just think that the same standards that's being done at the federal level should apply here in Maryland. I hope that's clear. Okay, appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Are there other questions, comments? Okay, we would like to have the following people to come up to render testimony. It is my understanding, Mr. Brogdon, are you here?
He's already.
I'm sorry?
He's at the table.
You're at the table. Okay. And if we could also have Claudia Wilson Randall to please come up. Allison Saunders, Alyssa Saunders. Sorry about that. Okay. I think that's your team. Are there other names, other individuals who signed up? These are the only names that we have.
Madam Chair, I believe there are some who are testifying remotely.
Okay, yes, okay. Okay, we will hear your testimony first, and then we will hear from my great friend from the ARC. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Henry Bogdan. I'm the Policy Director of Maryland Nonprofits. I sorely hope I'm not the smartest person in the room about indirect costs. We strongly support the bill. The background is that most federal money that comes into Maryland, there are a few exceptions, some education money, but most of it is subject to what's known as the uniform guidance. It's codified in 2 CFR 200, Code of Federal Regulations. That was put in, that started in 2014 in an effort to standardize practices across federal agencies by the Office of Management and Budget. They adopted, as a reform, they adopted at least a de minimis rate for indirect costs because the General Accounting Office had found that in many states, including Maryland, specifically named, were paying little or nothing toward their providers' overheads, and that this was causing organizations to go into financial instability because they have to pay for overhead somehow, and nobody is going to give them just checks to write overhead. The 10% figure was there because there was very little documentation they could find about nonprofits' overhead because nonprofits up to that time had been hiding their overhead. Because rating agencies had said, oh, you look for low overhead if you're going to make a contribution. Well, in the early part of that decade, all the national rating agencies that rate charities wrote joint letters to philanthropists saying, stop doing that. Because if they're not showing you overhead, they're either going to drive themselves into the ground, that's not going to be a good organization, or they're hiding it from you somewhere. It's real cost. It's the cost, as the senator alluded to, it's the telephone bill. It's upgrading their technology, which is a cost that keeps growing on providers for state services, security services, their property services done. May I continue? It's important to know that the state agencies are already now paying the federal rate of 15% on federal funds coming in to the same providers. It makes sense to have them paying one rate. Thank you.
Good afternoon. For the record, again, I'm Claudia Wilson-Randall. I'm the Executive Director of the Community Development Network. Our network is full of the community development corporations and nonprofit organizations that serve the community development industry. We develop affordable housing, commercial space, support small business development, and provide social services, so a wide array of services. And this indirect cost rate affects all of our members to some degree or another. I want to just say, particularly those who are have some of the heavy lifting, affordable housing finance, human services, support for small business, really are challenged at this point. And I think the earlier points made by Henry, there's a financial imperative, there's a consistency imperative, but also just clarity here to have the indirect cost rate paid by the federal government be the same as the state rate. So I think this Senate Bill 127 is a really important bill just to make it more simple and clear about what indirect cost rates are. So I just want to make that point. I think also that these organizations in particular are a key and vital part of unlocking Maryland's economy. So when we're talking about sustaining nonprofits and the need for organizations throughout the state to grow Maryland's economy, this is a really key thing that we do, that we support the nonprofit sector and we support governmental organizations organizations that are connected with government and service delivery well, and we do that well, because we have, you know, in addition to a budget deficit that we're talking about, what we need to do is really get the economy moving. So with that, I urge your support for Senate Bill 127, and I'll turn it over to my colleague. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. Thank you all for having us here today. My name is Alyssa Sanders, and I'm the Director of Advocacy at EveryMind, a nonprofit dedicated to providing mental health services in Maryland for over 65 years. We thank Senator Kagan for her leadership on this issue. We urge you to provide a favorable report on SB 127. This is a crucial step to strengthening the nonprofit sector. You know, EveryMind, we serve thousands of Marylanders annually. We provide school-based mental health services. We operate a 988 suicide and crisis lifeline. We support veterans, homeless individuals. And yet, like many nonprofits, we struggle with indirect costs. Imagine we have 65 case managers and therapists. We need to have supervisors to provide training, to provide supervision. That's where indirect costs. These folks we have to pay our phone bill. We have to pay our computer bill. HIPAA compliant cyber protection, specifically with our therapists, right? Because they're working with clients that their identities need to be protected. Tons of administrative support. That includes the people who write our checks and ensure that we get paid. And as has been mentioned, we have turned down applying for grants and RFPs specifically because we were concerned that we could not, that they would be underfunded and we could not do it. We have done that. So we really want the bill to align with the state grant policies with federal standards. We really appreciate you all doing a favorable report on this, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you all so very much.
We have folks online.
I think that ends.
Yeah, there's
Two questions? Two virtuals. Sorry about that. Sit tight. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairperson and members of the committee. My name is Beth Ann Dorman. I'm the president and CEO of For All Seasons, the largest nonprofit mental health agency and the only state-designated rape crisis center serving the 5 counties of Maryland's Midshore. I'm also speaking on behalf of the Maryland Coalition of Sexual Assault this afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you to provide favorable support for Senate Bill 127. The need for mental health and sexual assault services has continued to grow exponentially across our state, and the cost of delivering these services has also increased at an even faster rate. Nonprofits are often left to absorb these increases, diverting valuable resources away from direct services to maintain operations. For All Seasons has specifically experienced this reality. Our organization serves some of the most vulnerable populations in the state, offering trauma-certified therapy, rape crisis advocacy, and immediate access to mental health services. These programs depend on state grants to cover both our direct and our indirect cost. However, the current 10% indirect rate is insufficient to cover the true expenses required to maintain operations. In our rural service area, the cost of maintaining satellite offices and technology to ensure accessibility is a significant challenge. With rising expenses, these facilities face potential reductions in hours or closure. An updated indirect cost rate would provide the flexibility needed to sustain these critical points of access for victims and mental health clients. Yet since the 10% rate was set, nonprofits have faced unprecedented challenges, including the pandemic, declines in charitable giving, and increased demand for services. Senate Bill 127 is not merely a financial adjustment. It's an opportunity to ensure that Maryland's victims and the mental health clients continue to receive the support that they deserve. Our federal, state, and local governments rely on nonprofit organizations like ours as key partners in implementing programs and providing services to the public. There really is an outdated thinking on nonprofit indirect costs that contrasts sharply with the accepted practices in our for-profit businesses. In the for-profit realm, some of the indirect costs go up to 25%. I want to highlight the important part of the fiscal note and respectfully disagree with the premise that requires the state to contribute more to the indirect cost. The indirect costs are paid for now with other funds. Senate Bill 127 will allow that those funds be used for clients to support services that grant funds refuse to support. Freeing up the money that is currently being used for things like rent will mean survivors have a more comprehensive support program, not less. Without this adequate indirect cost recovery, we really do risk delaying care, reducing availability, and ultimately failing the very individuals who depend on us for support. So with that, I just want to conclude and say I really urge the committee to vote favorably on this legislation and demonstrate that the state's commitment is there 100% to sustain the life-changing services and the nonprofit community that blankets each and every one of the constituents you serve. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you very much. We have one more.
All right, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Chair Benson, it's a pleasure to see you, and thank you, Senator Kagan, for this wonderful bill. My name is Rob Malone, and I'm the president and CEO of the ARC Prince George's County. I have also over 20 years of experience in nonprofit management and have, for the last 4 years, served on one of the state's commissions or councils for the Mega Council, which is focused on driving efficiency in the Maryland state grant process. I am pleased to support this bill. I think this bill makes perfect sense. It is clear, and I actually just pulled data this morning to look at some very familiar nonprofits in our area. Their overhead rate ranges from 15% to 26%. So if they're doing work with the government and they still have that to cover, the question is, how is it covering if that's their real administrative or indirect cost? Smaller organizations and nonprofits led by people of color are also disadvantaged by the current makeup. Those organizations tend to be smaller. They tend to have higher indirect cost rates, and so it shuts them out of the system. And one of those that I actually serve on the board for that does work with the state actually has to wait months to get paid. On average, 4 months of invoices are outstanding, even though the nonprofit wants to get paid as quickly as possible. So if you have a 7% interest rate on that debt or that line of credit, that's going to eat up 2.5% of your indirect right there. Program expense ratios, if you look at United Way or if you look at Charity Navigator, any organization with an overhead rate of less than 30% is acceptable. And the last point I'll make is if folks are worried about there being more money required to support this, the answer is no. A $100,000 contract to do work should remain at a $100,000 contract. It just simply means that instead of having 90 cents to do the work, I'm going to use 85 cents and also support that with the indirect support. So I urge you to move this bill forward with a favorable report.
Thank you very much for your testimonies.
Very welcome.
Certainly is wonderful to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, that concludes this bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, colleagues.
Senate Bill 127. We would now entertain Senate Bill 177. Senator Hester, State Department of Education Control Authority, local food purchasing.
Thank you, Chair Benson. It's a pleasure to be
Thank you.
here.
I'm glad to see you.
Yeah, it's great to see you too and be in front of this very powerful and mighty new subcommittee on procurement. I'm here today to talk about Senate Bill 177, Procurement, State Department of Education, Local Food Purchasing. But for context, I just wanted to take a step back and share with you this report that my assistant's passing out now about the Maryland Certified Local Farm and Fish Program. Just briefly, this Farm and Fish program was created in 2021 to encourage state agencies, including four-year universities, to achieve an overall goal of purchasing 20% of their food from the Certified Local Farm and Fish Directory. The Department of Agriculture, the Department of General Services, MSDE, I've been working on this. But if you do happen to look on page 4, Appendix 1, you'll notice that as a state, we spend $97 million a year on food for various agencies, the largest being the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. And only 0.25% of that is currently purchased from locally certified farms and fisheries. So we've got a ways to go until we reach 20%, and that is truly what this bill is about. Senate Bill 177, the farm to school programs, will help students, small farmers, and the communities. Students will get to eat fresh, healthy foods. Small farmers gain access to bigger and more stable financial opportunities by selling to schools. And the community gets to benefit by having healthier children, more job opportunities, and a stronger local economy. As the Secretary will discuss shortly, the procurement process is often complicated, making it difficult for many small farmers to get their products purchased by the schools. And currently, they must engage separately with multiple school systems. And so the bill before you, as it's currently drafted, does two things. First, it allows the Maryland State Department of Education to create a master contract with local farmers, fishers, ranchers, food processors, and other local food businesses, so that the local school systems can then purchase from these master contracts, making it easier for small businesses to engage in procurement with several local school systems. It also includes the certified Chesapeake invasive species, with the goal of increasing blue catfish in school meals and decreasing the presence of this invasive but nutritious species from the Chesapeake Bay. And I had the opportunity to talk briefly with Senator Bailey before this committee, and they're currently trying to start a fish processing center that will be USDA approved. I believe the first one will be in Denton. And so I've continued to work with MSDE and DGS, and MSDE unfortunately could not be here today. They're in another briefing, I think, on the blueprint. But they did submit favorable testimony along with a small amendment. I'm delighted to have the Secretary of DGS with us today. They are changing their testimony, and you should have an informational letter favorable with amendments before you. And I just also want to point out that in your bill file, you have favorable testimony from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, the Capital Area Food Bank, and the American Heart Association. So in closing, I just want to state that, really this is about streamlining procurement, and it's an economic growth opportunity for our local farmers, our local fishers. It will bolster our economy and support sustainable agriculture, and at the same time enhance the health and well-being of our students. So it's a win for the economy, it's a win for the environment, and it's a win for children's education. And for these reasons, I urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 177. And Madam Chair, I have 3 members of my panel here. Shall I pass it off to the Secretary? Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator. Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you so much for allowing me to be here. For the record, I'm Atif Chaudhry, Secretary of the Maryland Department of General Services. The department supports this bill. We're working very closely behind the scenes with Senator Hester, with MSDE, on some amendments to the bill to work out some technical nuance associated with this, but to make sure we are able to meet the spirit and intent of the bill, legislative intent of the bill, which is to get more local foods from from local farms into our school systems. So working very closely to effectuate that and make sure that that is addressed. Obviously, as everyone here is well aware, procurement can be very cumbersome in various in all levels of government. In particular, in state government, we are working very diligently to try and address that, and through various measures, including a bill, actually a procurement reform act. But here, we're working very closely to ensure that we are taking different avenues, different measures to work with our small mom and pop and local farms and entities that are producing these types of food products to be able to service them. So locally grown, locally operated food is provided to our school system, so they've got fresh food in our school systems, for nutritional value for our students. So support that in closing, I just want to say that the agency supports the bill. We will be working. We've got a letter of support with amendments before you today, but we will be coordinating with the senator and with MSDE in a very close collaboration on some additional technical amendments to make sure that we're able to meet all the requirements and the intent of the bill.
Thank you for your testimony. Next.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. My name is Charlotte Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Rural Maryland Council. I'm happy to be here in support of Senate Bill 144, which we will believe will ease some burdens related to obstacles for our local farmers to access institutional markets. We also support the Certified Local Farm and Fish Program, and including that goal of 20% local procurement. According to USDA, Maryland hosts over 1,400 schools and almost 900,000 students that they are feeding every day. I found through a JCR report that Maryland school spends over $300 million on food. And if we could capture just 20% of that, that would be $60 million for our local farmers. So we want to see our local farmers accessing those markets. We believe that will increase their profitability and help improve our rural economy. So we are here in support and ask for your favorable report of Senate Bill 177. Thank you.
Thank you very much. But I'll come back. I have a question I need to ask, but I'll come back.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. For the record, my name is Tyler Huff. I am the Director of Government Relations for Maryland Farm Bureau. We appreciate the Senator's work on this bill and are here in support of SB 177. The farm-to-school programs are beneficial for students, small farms, and local communities, as these programs enable students to access fresh, healthy, and locally sourced food. Farmers benefit from the opportunity to sell directly to the school systems and have another outlet for their product. The current procurement process, as we've heard, is a little bit cumbersome and complicated and creates barriers for farmers and food producers. Many are unable to participate fully due to the complexity of engaging with individual and multiple school systems. The master contracts that would be created with MSDE would be extremely beneficial to our farmers and help them have, as I said, another outlet, another opportunity, which will help increase profitability and help keep farms in business moving forward. These streamlined procurement processes, and as well as the addition to the blue catfish invasive, which would be extremely beneficial to aquaculture, and as this invasive species keeps eating oysters out of the bay. So better for the bay, better for aquaculture, and better for the farmers in Maryland, and we urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I want to go back to ask Ms. Davis a question. Could you cite for me the statistics that you just gave?
Yeah, there were two areas. One was USDA does a farm-to-school census. So those are the numbers for the number of schools and the number of students. In 2023, this group, Senate Budget and Tax, considered universal meals for all Maryland students, and there was a joint chairman's report. So that's where I got the numbers on the spending for both the free and the paid meals. Say that. So that was $300 million total that Maryland schools spend on food procurement for meals, and using that 20% goal would be $60 million that would be available if we were able to access those procurements for our local farmers.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Yes, Mr. Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator. I appreciate the bill. I think you had me at Catfish School Lunch. But all kidding aside, the handout that you provided, just a question. There's a couple of the agencies that have a waiver right now from this program, I guess from the Certified Local Farm Program. Because you identified some of the larger agencies like the Department of Public Safety, but then they have a waiver. So does that mean that they would not participate in doing this?
I can't answer that one. No, sorry. You're testing my memory now, Senator.
Okay.
It was because that bill was from 2021.
Well, not the bill per se, but I'm just trying to understand, I guess, what was handed out. So like the appendix here has all the agencies that, you know, how much food they've purchased. And so the largest one, it was referenced in the testimony, is the Department of Public Safety. But when you flip back 2 other pages, it says the following agencies have requested waivers from the Certified Local Food or Local Farm and Fish Program. So does that mean that they don't participate in that or wouldn't participate? Because again, I think the intent is to capture, obviously, the large amount of people.
Yes, that is true.
Okay.
I can get you the actual waiver and the reasons for the waiver. But we built that in 2021 just to try to, you know, it was a goal of 20%, and the waiver was a waiver to report. So.
Okay, because no, I mean, I'm with you as far as I think this is a great bill. I think it's a great idea to get more food from Maryland farms into the system per se, I guess, and we can talk offline of just how do we get, because again, Department of Public Safety, they're the largest one. They have a waiver. University of Maryland College Park, they're pretty high up there. They have a waiver. So again, trying to make a significant impact of what we could do to potentially have them participate, but we can follow up offline.
Yeah,
So,
I'll get back to you with that information. Thank you so much for the question.
And I can actually add to that too as well, Senator. The DGS, Department of General Services, working actually very closely. We've got a senior procurement advisory group. It's called SPAG. In that meeting, we're working very closely. Where all the senior procurement officers across the state, you know, meet quarterly just to talk through challenges, issues, new initiatives. So in one of our recent meetings, we actually had the Department of Agriculture as well as local farmers attend that to try and help reiterate the need for this program, how to report, why are you reporting, and any avenues that we can assist with from a procurement standpoint to help effectuate and increase that percentage to make sure that we're trying to get as close as we can to that 20% mark across the state for all agencies.
Thank you for those questions. I'm looking at this brochure that just came to us. At the bottom of page number 1, it indicates that the Maryland Correctional Enterprise processes the meat and seafood products for state agencies. But it says also that it has no obligation, or it's questionable whether or not it reports its local seafood procurement activities. Is there any reason why they don't? Does anybody know?
I'll get back to you on that as well, Senator.
Yes.
Good question.
Okay. All right. Are there any other questions? Do we have anyone wanting to? No. No one? Okay. Thank you, Senator. Thank you all very much for coming this afternoon.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Happy to be here this afternoon. My name is Valerie Radomski, Chief Procurement Officer for the Maryland Department of Transportation. Joining me is Scott Pimento, Chief Financial Officer for the State Highway Administration. He will be available after my testimony for technical questions. I'm here today in support of Senate Bill 196, Procurement, Electronic Transactions, Clarification of Fees Due. This legislation will allow MDOT to continue using our e-procurement platform, BidExpress or BidX, to post construction, maintenance, and wetlands mitigation contracts. BidX is a transportation subscriber-based platform used by 39 states. State Highway has been using it since 2017. MDTA has been using it since 2020. Since then, we've received more than 6,000 bids from 471 unique vendors. I would like to note that MDOT does post public notice of all solicitations with EMA as required. But EMA is not tailored for large transportation and construction procurements. Use of BidX has been authorized by the Board of Public Works, but the board staff told us we need to seek this revision in current law in order to clarify that subscription costs collected by Infotech do not need to be deposited into the Department of General Services Operations Revenue Fund, as currently required by State Finance and Procurement Article, Section 13226. Since statute is drafted so that any fees collected shall be deposited into the state fund, it would require Infotech, owner of the transportation-specific electronic bidding platform BidX, to deposit the fees it charges potential bidders into the Operations Revenue Fund. Infotech provides BidX at no cost to MDOT, but at a monthly subscription fee to potential bidders on MDOT construction and maintenance contracts. BidX requires a subscription fee for potential bidders only. I would like to note for you that subcontractors, including disadvantaged small business enterprises, can access BidX free of charge to search solicitations and interact with prime contractors. We are asking for language in the statute to specify that fees that are due to the state go to the Operations Revenue Fund. That would make it possible for Infotech to continue to provide the BidX electronic bidding platform at no cost to MDOT. There is no fiscal impact with this change. In fact, if we have to stop using BidX, MDOT would incur additional costs in time and labor because we would have to go back to a paper-based procurement process. In conclusion, the minor language change provided in Senate Bill 196 will ensure that MDOT continues to use the most efficient, cost-effective method for procurement. Thank you for your time, and we would be happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions? This is a very interesting bill.
Thank you.
It is. Okay, we will consider this bill. I thank you all very much for your testimony. Does anyone have any questions that you want to ask? Okay. There aren't any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Does anyone, any comments from the committee? Okay. What is your pleasure? Do you think we should look at these bills and come back and vote, or what are your thoughts? Should we vote now, or should we come back at some point?
We need to end the meeting for now.
I'm sorry?
We need to consider them first, so we can't vote today.
Okay. All right. Oh, yeah, because I'm not so sure that this last bill doesn't run contrary to
Madam Chair?
something that we talked about this morning. Yes.
Yeah, I would concur with Senator King that we wait on that. Some of us
We
came
can wait
in.
on all of these bills. What we need to do is we need to look at the bills. They need to be passed along to the attorney, and then we need to ourselves digest the contents of the bill, and then we will make a decision.
Thank you.
Again.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think probably the next meeting will be
Next
in
Wednesday.
2 weeks, so February 5th. Just depends on the kind of bill load, and then from there, we'll see if it's going to be every 2 weeks or every week. And then just a note on the schedule, because we're hearing these after full B&T hearings, the schedule may likely always not be accurate in terms of the exact start date. So we're going to do our best to get it close, but we don't want you sitting around with dead time between the end of B&T and procurement. So start time in the schedule will likely be artificially early, and everything will follow the normal B&T in our future meetings.
You may also be aware of the fact that we are working very closely with the Governor's Committee on Procurement, and we would probably be in a better position to vote on these bills within the next couple of weeks. If you have any questions or concerns, could you please direct them to the attorney that's here in Budget and Taxation so that we can keep it moving along? I said to the governor's office, we are not interested in them being over there and we're over here. We need to work collectively so we won't have any disagreements along the way. I think the art of compromise is very important, but I really do hope that we will look at these bills. There are a couple that I have some concerns about, I want to tell you, and I'll be talking to the attorney about this. If you have any concerns, please let us know so that we can move along. All right.